Hi everyone, and welcome to our opening video lecture for doctoral writing and research. So let's get started by introducing the main textbook that we'll be reading over the next few weeks for Unit 1 in the syllabus, the basic outline of which you see here. This week, we're starting with the fundamentals of scholarly writing. However, we're going to read our main textbook a bit out of order. So this week we're reading parts 1 and 4, whereas parts 2 and 3 are covered next week. As the authors note in the intro, you'll want to read this book at least twice. Start with a quick skim, flipping past what seems to be tedious or confusing, and make note of what's important for a closer read later on. Such advice relates to our topic next week, when I'll offer the digestion metaphor as a means of processing large amounts of reading material. You'll need to learn the art of skimming, because you simply don't have enough time to read everything all at once. Anyways, let's start with the basic fundamentals of academic writing. For more on this, check out the recommended reading this week by William Strunk, which is a classic style guideline that's very accessible and timeless. Let me summarize some of the key points. First, here are some common grammatical errors. The biggest issue we see in sentence construction is run-ons, and here you have some simple strategies for dealing with this common problem. Another issue is subject-verb agreement. I fall into this problem a lot in my own writing, as I sometimes forget to consistently use the same verb tense throughout my paragraphs. In terms of style, use the active voice, which follows this basic construction: subject, verb, object. The active voice is usually more direct and vigorous than the passive, which tends to be less direct, less bold, and less concise. Of course, there are times when the passive is convenient or necessary, but as a rule of thumb, always shoot for the active voice. Finally, it's crucial to write clear sentences with concise, specific language, free of redundancies. Parsimony is a key virtue of writing well. Now let's move on to the elementary principles of paragraph construction. Paragraphs of scholarly writing. As the basic unit of composition, make sure that each single paragraph is defined by a single coherent topic. A rudimentary strategy is to begin each paragraph with a topic sentence in order to aid and provide a signpost for the reader, who should never be lost at sea searching for the topic. Of course, you don't always have to start each paragraph as such, but really the key lesson here is that the topic of the paragraph should be clear, unambiguous, and fully evident. Reading 2 suggests a more advanced strategy called the uneven U, which you see depicted here. This provides a 5-level system of sentence structure within a single paragraph, with each sentence on relative degrees of abstraction and specificity. The higher up the scale, the more abstract, the lower, more concrete. Look at the graph and key on the right. See how the paragraph opens with general statements, moves down to provide evidence for its claim, and then summarizes and extends that evidence before moving on to an abstract conclusion. This is an paragraph structure. Notice as well how the paragraph ends on a higher level from where it started. This gives the paragraph a progressive structure, moving the conversation forward. And as we'll see in the next slide, by combining this type of paragraph into larger structures of multiple paragraphs, you can establish a developmental rhythm and trajectory that communicates the overall goals of your work. For example, look at this graph here, which is also from reading 2. This shows a series of uneven U-shaped paragraphs that are structured together into a fractal formation. To reiterate my point from the previous slide, look at the progressive trajectory of this structure. This graph depicts a flow, or movement, which is a key stylistic device. Remember, scholarly writing is inherently communicative. This point is typically underappreciated in academia. I mean, how many of you have read an academic article or book that you had to trudge through? Frankly, a lot of academic writing is bad writing. But moving on with the assigned readings, the authors of Reading 3 remind us of helpful literary strategies to improve our communicative performance. For example, pacing is a stylistic device that shows how a story unfolds. Basic principle of this application in academic writing is to reveal or disclose the discursive process to the reader. That is, to provide a plot-like line for the reader to follow. Practically, this plot-like argumentative line requires a balance between action and commentary, between evidence and analysis. Or to use the 5-point scale from the previous slide, level 4 or 5 elements with level 1 or 2 elements. You want a narrative that's neither too thin, in terms of skimping on analysis, nor too thick, in terms of analysis that's too dense, difficult to penetrate. On a more general level, Reading 3 stresses the need to incorporate a human element into academic writing, which otherwise tends to be too dry and unrelatable. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should be exclusively writing a first-person narrative. However, I'm using the word storytelling metaphorically, not literally. There's a serious risk of oversimplifying things by making it too personal, so that's not exactly what I'm suggesting. Rather, what I'm saying is that, as an author, your readers need to hear your authorial voice, and that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, a subtle personal touch may be accessible, thereby enhancing its communicability. Practically, this doesn't necessarily entail first-person narration. I'll come back to the risk of speaking in the first person momentarily, but there are other ways to accomplish this recommendation, such as using anecdotes or illustrative examples. The key idea of academic storytelling is that you want to relate to your reader, to keep them engaged and following along with your argument. Now, we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit, as we'll discuss the nature of scholarly arguments next week. For now, let's take a step back and talk about how to even start the writing process. What strategies are there for getting writing done? The tip is consistency. Get in the habit of writing daily. Carve out a specific block of time every workday and just write. Give yourself small, easily achievable goals. Don't plan to write 4 pages a day. Don't try to write 8 hours a day or whatever. Focus on the slow and steady. Write about anything related to your scholarship. Write a class, for example. In fact, you may want to maintain a research journal for yourself. Not only does it help your habit of writing daily, but you can keep track of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And who knows, you may end up generating some rough content for your future dissertation. Simply practice what we call free writing, or writing without constraint, without feeling self-conscious. Don't worry about correct grammar or spelling, just keep writing. No matter how crazy or unorganized it is, free writing is just for you. This isn't the polished material that you share with others. Rather, this is the raw content that gets your thoughts down on paper. While free writing, worry about finding the right words. Follow your so-called felt sense. This is the process for finding words for what we sense but cannot yet express. If you feel like you're struggling to articulate a point, simply accept the words that just arrive in the mind. Be comfortable about noticing if they're wrong or don't fit what we feel or intend. Quote-unquote right words the first go-round. So avoid trying to decide on the right word, at least while free writing. It's much better to instead write down a few quote-unquote wrong words and see where they lead. Only later, while revising, do you need to balance this prerogative with the virtue of parsimony, of being concise with your language. With that said, avoid premature revising, especially during your daily free writing routine. Carve out another slot of time to go back and rework what you've already written. It's always good to have a little break in between. Remember that every piece of scholarly writing results from a good deal of hard work that never makes it onto the page. That's the iceberg metaphor. Your final product is what the reader sees above the surface, but that final presentation would not be possible without the discursive structure hidden below. So, in sum, as you develop your writing habits, you need to find your scholarly voice. There's a fine balance here between establishing a formal tone that resonates with your professional audience without getting too dull. When you're done free writing and you're revising your final drafts, avoid informalities. Readers want to hear your voice, but this isn't the same as a normal in-person conversation. Unlike in-person conversations, your final writing products take time and careful consideration to produce. There are formal expectations. Stylistically, you want to be clear in moving your plot-like argument along, but don't become too repetitive in announcing what will be done or what has just been done. Keep the pace moving forward, while also providing just enough signposting along the way. And more importantly, add your own thoughts, ideas, interpretations, and analysis to the conversation. What's your position on whatever it is that you're writing about? That is the key to developing your scholarly voice. With that said, use first-person pronouns cautiously. Certainly, they can help you while free writing, but try taking them out when revising. If your phrase or sentence doesn't lose any meaning without, obviously you don't need them. Only use them when appropriate, such as when you're trying to achieve a certain degree of assertiveness or clarity, or when you're positioning yourself in your writing. The rule of thumb here is to just be very cautious. With that said, let's introduce your first assignment. On our Moodle course shell, under the discussion form for week 1, I want each of you to start and write a brief autobiographical essay. Who are you? Where are you from? What's your background? What are your research interests? Do you have any ideas about turning your interests into possible topics, or better yet, research questions? Pay attention to your style and form. Your final draft shouldn't be in the form of free writing. We just want to see the tip of your iceberg. Tip of your iceberg. As part of this assignment, you also need to respond to at least 2 other discussion threads. In particular, try helping your peers suss out or elaborate their research interests by asking questions. As we'll see in the coming weeks, our goal will be to generate research questions. So use your responses to help in that regard. Okay, so that's it. I've already mentioned the standpoint essay, which is your only assignment for the week. You should begin identifying a possible dissertation to read for your source analysis assignment that begins next week. On Moodle, you'll see a folder of PhD dissertations, from which you'll choose one. I'll discuss the source analysis assignment further next week, but consult the syllabus information. Also, start thinking about your research proposal due at the end of the semester. Again, the syllabus has more information, but please contact me if you have any questions. In any case, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.